The downtown subway at midnight was a world painted in shades of exhausted gray. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry insects, flickering in a rhythm that seemed designed to provoke a headache. The air hung thick with the ghosts of a million commutes, old coffee, damp wool, and the faint metallic tang of despair. Leo leaned his forehead against the cold, grimy window of the train car, his eyes burning with a fatigue so deep it felt engraved in his bones. His body was a map of aches. His feet, encased in cheap, worn-out shoes, throbbed with a constant, angry pulse after 14 straight hours. 14 hours split between the breakfast shift at the Greasy Spoon Diner and the evening cleanup crew at the conference center. The third job, stocking shelves at the all-night grocery, waited for him in just a few precious hours. He could already feel the chill of the walk-in freezer on his skin. In the pocket of his stained apron, a folded piece of paper felt like a lead weight. The final notice. His rent was 2 months behind. The landlord's scrawled threat, eviction by week's end, was a silent scream in the quiet of his mind. The tips from tonight, a pathetic handful of crumpled bills and loose change, wouldn't even cover a third of what he owed. A hollow, cold feeling spread from his stomach, colder than any subway draft. The train lurched violently around a corner, the screech of metal on metal tearing through the car. Leo's grip on the overhead pole slipped. His vision swam at the edges, darkness creeping in. Just close your eyes for a second, he'd bargained with himself, his thoughts slow and syrupy. Just 1 second. No one will notice. His knees, strained and trembling, finally gave out. It wasn't a graceful faint. It was a total, utter surrender. He didn't crumple to the dirty floor. Instead, he fell backwards, expecting the hard, vacant plastic of a subway seat. But he didn't hit plastic. He landed on something solid, unyielding, and disturbingly warm. A jolt of pure, undiluted horror shot through the fog of his exhaustion. His eyes flew open. He wasn't on a seat. He was sprawled across someone's lap, a man's lap. In a split second, he took in the fine, dark wool of tailored trousers, the sharp crease, the sheer, intimidating quality of the fabric under his clutching hands. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I just—" The words tumbled out, choked and frantic. He tried to scramble up, to push himself away from this profound and embarrassing violation of a stranger's space. His limbs felt like they were made of wet sand. Before he could find his feet, a hand settled on his shoulder. It was not a harsh grip, it was not aggressive, but it was absolute. A weight of quiet authority that stilled his frantic movements as effectively as a shouted command. The touch was cool, the fingers long and elegant, but the pressure was undeniable. Stay. The voice was a low murmur, so quiet it was almost lost beneath the rattling groan of the train. Yet Leo heard it with crystalline clarity. It wasn't a request. It was a calm, impossible decree that wrapped around him like velvet and iron. Every instinct to flee, to apologize, to die of shame, simply halted. His body went still, obeying a deeper, older warning system that recognized true power when it encountered it. The hands on his shoulder didn't move. It was a steadying presence, as if the stranger thought he might shatter if let go. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone and exhaustion. He tried to twist to see the face of the man he was currently using as furniture, but his neck muscles refused to cooperate. The crushing weight of his tiredness, held back by adrenaline for a moment, came crashing back in a dizzying wave. I really need to, he mumbled, the sentence dissolving into a slur. You need to rest. The voice came again, closer now. The man had leaned forward. Leo could sense his presence of him, a solid, immovable wall at his back. There was no breath on his neck, no smell of coffee or late-night dinner, just a faint, clean scent, like frost and old, polished stone. You are going to hurt yourself. I'm fine, Leo lied, even as the world blurred and his eyelids grew impossibly heavy. I have another shift in... When? 6 hours, Leo whispered, the words tasting like ash. A silence followed. It was a heavy, thoughtful silence that seemed to swallow the noise of the train. Then that quiet, commanding voice spoke again, softer than before. Sleep. I will wake you at your stop. Every shred of common sense he had left screamed in protest. This was insane. This was how horror stories started. A strange, intimidating man on an empty subway car telling him to sleep? He should be running for the emergency cord. But Leo was so far past the points of rational fear. Fear was a luxury for people who weren't drowning, and the simple, firm certainty in that voice, the unnatural calm, felt like the first solid ground he'd felt in months. The warmth beneath him was real. The hand on his shoulder was an anchor, and his body, his treacherous, broken body, was voting overwhelmingly for oblivion. Just for a minute, he bargained again, this time with the stranger. Then I'll get up. Then I'll deal with it. The train rocked on its tracks, a rhythmic, lulling motion. The hard muscle and bone of the stranger's lap was a better pillow than the thin mattress waiting for him in his dingy apartment. The unnatural calm and solidity at his back promised a protection he hadn't known since childhood. The last of his resistance evaporated. His eyes closed. His final, coherent thought was that the man didn't smell like the city. He smelled like a forest at midnight, deep and ancient, and utterly out of place in this grimy, fluorescent tube of human transit. Then sleep pulled him under into a deep, dreamless void. He did not see the other passengers in the car. He did not notice how the few souls sharing the late-night ride had all, as one, subtly turned away, how they found sudden and intense interest in their phones, in the dark tunnels outside the window, in anything but the scene at the far end of the car. He missed the flickers of primal fear in their eyes, the desperate curiosity they dared not satisfy. Because even if the exhausted young man in the waitress's uniform did not recognize him, they did. Caspian Thorn, regent of the northern enclave, one of the ancient, hidden sovereigns who moved through the shadows of the city like a rumor given flesh. He never took public transit. He never moved without his entourage, his layers of security, his careful invisible buffer that kept his world separate. Tonight, for reasons known only to him, he had dismissed his guards. He had chosen to walk among the rushing tide of mortal life, a silent observer in his own domain. And now this human, this boy radiating utter depletion, had collapsed into his orbit. Caspian looked down. He studied the young man with an intensity he rarely afforded anyone. Dark lashes fanned against pale skin, stained with the bruises of chronic exhaustion. His hands lying limp were calloused, his nails short and practical. A cheap plastic name tag pinned crooked root of the faded polo shirt read Leo with cracked letters. He smelled of dish soap, fried food, and the sharp, sour tang of sheer, unsustainable effort. Something shifted inside Caspian. A fissure appeared in the permafrost that had encased his heart for longer than this city had stood. It wasn't warmth, not yet. It was the first crack of ice under a forgotten sun. When was the last time anyone touched me without terror, without calculation? The thought was unexpected, a ghost from a time before crowns and covenants. This boy had fallen against him not out of courage or design, but from pure, obliterating weariness. He was too tired to be afraid, and now, in that vulnerability, he slept, he trusted. Not Caspian the regent, but the simple human comfort of not being alone in the dark. The train slowed for the next station. Caspian felt the young man, Leo, stir. a small, distressed sound escaping his throat as the change in motion threatened to drag him back to consciousness. The hands on his shoulder tightened, just a fraction. Sleep. The voice murmured, the word a soft command woven with a thread of something almost like gentleness. Leo immediately stilled, sinking back into the depths. Caspian told himself this was logic. If the boy woke now, disoriented and terrified of his situation, it could cause a problematic scene. Better to let him rest until his destination. It was the most efficient solution. But the truth, cold and undeniable, settled in his chest. He had been searching for 3 months since his young ward, Elora, had retreated into a silence no one could breach. He had been scouring the city for a sign, for a specific, rare gift among mortals, true perception, the ability to see beyond the film. Leo awoke to the gentle but firm pressure of fingers on his shoulder, and a voice that seemed to resonate from the stone walls of a deep, quiet place. Your stop. His eyes opened slowly, gummed with sleep and confusion. His brain fumbled, pieces of reality not fitting together. The hard seat, the noise, the profound, unforgivable lapse. Memory returned like a cold splash of water. The subway. He'd fallen. On someone. Oh no, he gasped, jerking upright so fast the world spun. Strong, cool hands caught his elbows, steadied him, and released him just as quickly, as if the contact had been purely functional. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I just... The apology died, withered by the sheer presence of the man now looking at him. He was arresting, not handsome in a magazine way, but beautiful like a cliff face is beautiful, a study in stark, severe lines that promised both grandeur and danger. Sharp cheekbones, a severe mouth, hair the color of a raven's wing falling just to his collar. His eyes were the pale, clear gray of a winter sky moments before snow. He wore a charcoal coat over a simple black sweater, clothes that whispered of silence, immense wealth. And he sat with a stillness that was profoundly unnatural, making the very air around him seem restless and loud in comparison. But it wasn't his arresting looks that stole the breath from Leo's lungs. It was the light. Leo had lived with it since he could remember. The aura, the colors. Synesthesia, the doctors had called it, a crossing of wires in the brain. He perceived the emotional states of others as faint, shimmering halos of color. For most people, it was a weak, muddy glow, easy to ignore. He learned to tune it out, a background hum to the world. This man blazed. He was wreathed in a corona of profound, deep indigo, the color of a midnight ocean under a starless sky. Loneliness. It was so vast and so deep, it felt physical. Threaded through that indigo were veins of cool, sharp silver. Duty, control, ancient grief, and at the very core, a thin, desperate, brilliant strand of gold. Hope. It was the most vivid, complex, and heartbreaking array of colors Leo had ever witnessed. Do not apologize, the man said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the space between them. It matched his colors, beautiful, sorrowful, and unnervingly steady. You required rest. The train's doors slid open with a hydraulic sigh. A gust of stale, tunnel-tinged air washed into the car. This is your stop, the man repeated, unless I was mistaken about the address. Leo's sleep-slowed mind tripped over the words. How could you know where I live? A slight, almost imperceptible nod toward Leo's chest. Your name tag. I saw the street name written on the inside in permanent marker. People often mark things they are afraid of losing. Leo glanced down, his fingers fumbling with the plastic rectangle. Flipping it over, he saw it, his own messy scrawl from his first week at the diner when he kept forgetting to take it off. 145 Crestview, apartment 4B. A flush of heat crawled up his neck. Right. He should go. The doors were open. This was his station, the end of the line, the gateway to his crumbling, lonely life. But his feet felt rooted to the grimy floor. The man's colors held him, that desperate thread of gold pulsing softly. "Are you all right?" The question slipped out, clumsy and intimate. The man's gray eyes widened just a fraction. A ripple of surprise moved through his indigo aura. "Why do you ask?" "Because you look incredibly sad." He winced as soon as he said it. "I'm sorry, that's rude. I don't know why I said that. I see it." The man was silent for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. "I am," he said, finally, the admission simple and stark. "And you are the first person to notice in a very long time." The doors beeped a warning, preparing to close. Panic and something else, a reckless, exhausted curiosity, clashed in Leo's chest. Acting on pure, uncharacteristic impulse, he fumbled in his apron pocket. He found a grease-stained napkin and the cheap ballpoint pen he used for orders. Hand trembling, he scrawled his phone number. If you ever need someone to talk to, not that I'm anyone special, but, you know." He thrust the napkin at the stranger, his face burning with a humiliation that felt how liberating. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and fled through the closing doors, the sound of them shutting behind him like a period at the end of a bizarre, dreamlike sentence. He didn't look back. He couldn't bear to see pity or worse, amusement on that impassive face. If he had looked, he would have seen Caspian Thorne staring at the napkin in his hand as if it were a sacred text delivered by an angel. He would have seen the brilliant gold filament in his aura flare, brightening, strengthening, as if fed by a new kind of fuel. He would have watched, transfixed, as Caspian carefully, reverently folded the greasy paper and placed it inside his coat, directly over the still, silent place where his heart had once beaten. Leo's apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in a building that sagged with resignation. The elevator was a promise broken for years. He kicked off his ruined shoes, not caring where they landed, and collapsed on the second-hand couch that smelled faintly of dust and old dreams. The silence of the place was a physical weight. His phone buzzed on the chipped coffee table. A notification from his bank, a fee for an overdrawn account. Another from his landlord, a reminder text about the eviction notice. The numbers swam before his eyes. The calculus of survival was a math problem with no solution. But his mind kept circling back, not to the numbers, but to the colors. That deep, drowning indigo, that stubborn, shining gold. The man on the subway hadn't felt like a predator. He felt like a lighthouse in a fog, isolated, immense, and signaling a warning he himself didn't seem to understand. 3 days passed. 3 days of double shifts, of avoiding his landlord's calls, of staring at the ceiling in the dark, wondering what fragile thread of hope he'd imagined in a stranger's light. He'd chalked it up to exhaustion, to the surreal logic of sleep deprivation. The napkin, the offer, it was the act of a man pushed past his limits, embarrassing and best forgotten. Then, on the 4th day, his phone rang, an unknown number with a downtown area code. His heart did a complicated, unpleasant flip in his chest. He was up to his elbows in soapy water at the diner's sink. "Hello? Is this Leo?" The voice was unmistakable. It was the voice from the subway. Deep, quiet, and laced with a strange, formal cadence. It sent a shock through his system, cold and electric. "Yes, how did you gave me your number 3 days ago." "Right, obviously." I grabbed a dish towel, his grip tight. "I didn't think you'd actually call. I need to ask you something." His tone was serious, grave. "It will sound unusual." Leo gave a short, humorless laugh. "More unusual than falling asleep on a stranger and giving him my number on a dirty napkin?" A pause. Then quieter. "Considerably more unusual than that. I need your assistance, and I am prepared to offer significant compensation for your time." Suspicion, that old familiar companion, coiled in Leo's gut. What kind of assistance?
Not that kind, he said quickly, as if he'd sensed the direction of Leo's thoughts. I need. He hesitated, and Leo heard the faintest intake of breath, a human gesture from a man who didn't seem to need air. My ward, a young girl in my care. She stopped speaking 3 months ago. She is 6 years old. Every specialist, every therapist, they cannot reach her. But I've been researching your condition. Synesthesia, the perception of emotion as color. Leo's hand clenched around the phone. The noisy diner faded to a distant buzz. How do you know about that? I saw it. When you looked at me on the train, the colors around me, they shifted in your perception. You see what people feel, do you not? Not, not people, Leo corrected automatically, his voice a whisper. Most people it's too faint, but you were different. I blazed, the man finished, his own voice softening. Didn't I? Yes. I believe my Alara needs someone who can see her, truly see what she is feeling when words have failed her. I believe you may be the only person who can help. Leo's shift manager was glaring at him from across the stainless steel counter, pointing angrily at the wall clock. This is crazy, he hissed into the phone, turning his back. I don't know you. I don't know anything about helping traumatized kids. I can teach you, and I would pay you $5,000 a week. Leo nearly dropped the phone into the sink. What? 10,000, he continued, his tone utterly matter-of-fact. If you relocate to the residence, so you are available when Alara needs you. That's insane. Yes, he agreed, no humor in his voice. It likely.
The wrought iron gates of Thornwood were not merely closed, they were a statement. 20 feet high, fashioned into intricate patterns of twisting vines and sharp, stylized thorns, they seemed less like an entrance and more like a warning. Beyond them, a gravel drive wound its way through manicured grounds that looked more like a public park than a private residence, culminating in a house that belonged on a European postcard. It was all dark gray stone, soaring turrets and leaded gauze windows that glittered like cold, knowing eyes in the morning light. Leo stood on the sidewalk, feeling smaller and more threadbare than ever in his one decent pair of trousers and a button-down shirt that had been cheap even when new. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, a physical force. This was a mistake, a colossal, life-altering mistake. He was about to turn and walk away, to call the whole insane thing off, when a figure materialized at the gate. One moment there was nothing but iron and shadow. The next, a woman stood there, as if she had condensed from the mist clinging to the manicured hedges. She was pale, her hair a severe silver blonde knot at the nape of her neck. She wore a tailored suit the color of slate, and her eyes, a pale, assessing blue, swept over Leo in one swift, dismissive glance. He felt instantly catalogued. Cheap shoes, nervous posture, human. You are the synesthete, she stated. It was not a question. Leo managed a stiff nod, his throat dry. I am Irina, the house steward. The regent is expecting you. Her voice was crisp, devoid of warmth, like the crackle of frost on a window pane. She produced a heavy, ornate key and unlocked a small pedestrian gate set within the larger one. It swung open without a sound. The regent, Leo echoed, stepping through. The air inside the grounds felt different, colder, cleaner, and charged with a subtle, watchful silence. The inside of Thornwood stole the breath from Leo's lungs. It wasn't just opulent, it was old. The grandeur wasn't for show, it was the accumulated weight of centuries. Marble floors gleamed underfoot, tapestries depicting mythical, somber scenes hung on walls of dark wood. A chandelier, a complex constellation of crystal and cold iron, dominated the cavernous entrance hall. Every surface, every object whispered of power, history, and secrets kept in the dark. It was also, Leo realized with a jolt, profoundly empty. No sounds of life, no distant chatter or clatter from a kitchen, just the echo of their footsteps and that deep, humming quiet. Irina led him through a labyrinth of corridors.
They passed rooms shrouded in dust cloths, libraries with shelves climbing to dizzying heights, galleries of portraits whose subjects all shared Caspian's sharp, severe beauty and unsettling pale-eyed gaze. Finally, they stopped before a set of double doors carved with an intricate pattern of interlocking circles and sharp angles. "Wait here," Irina commanded. She knocked twice, a precise, respectful sound, and slipped inside. Leo waited, his heart hammering a frantic tattoo against his ribs. From behind the door, he heard the murmur of voices, Irina's clipped tones, and then, cutting through them, that familiar low baritone, Caspian. "Show him in." The door opened, and Leo immediately stopped breathing. The room was a formal parlor, opulent and cold, and it was full of people, at least 15 of them arranged in chairs and sofas, all dressed in elegant, dark clothing. As one, they turned to look at him. The impact was not just social, it was visual. The colors. Oh God, the colors. Every single person in the room blazed with an emotional aura so vivid, so intense, it was like staring into a box of scattered jewels under a blazing sun. Violent reds of anger and suspicion, sickly greens of envy, deep, bruised purples of resentment and fear, cold, calculating silvers. They swirled and clashed in a silent, psychic storm so powerful it made his eyes water and his head throb. He'd never seen such concentrated, potent emotional output. It was overwhelming, terrifying. What are they? Caspian was there suddenly, at his elbow, his touch cool and firm. He must have crossed the vast room in an instant. "Leo, look at me." Leo did, dragging his gaze away from the dazzling, painful mosaic. Caspian's colors were still the deep, sorrowful indigo and silver, but now woven through with threads of warm, concerned amber. He was an island of relative calm in the emotional hurricane. "Breathe," Caspian said, his voice low, for Leo alone. "What are they?" Leo whispered again, his voice trembling. Caspian's pale gray eyes held his. "They are vampires, Leo. All of us. This is my world." The word, said aloud with such calm certainty, should have been the ultimate confirmation of madness. Leo should have laughed or screamed or run, but the evidence was irrefutable. The preternatural stillness, the impossible speed, the chilling, powerful emotional auras that were so much more than human, and Caspian's own colors which had never lied. The profound sorrow was real. The desperate hope was real. "Vampires," Leo repeated, the word hollow. "Real vampires. And I fell asleep on a vampire king's lap." "Regent," corrected Caspian softly. "And yes, is Ilara—" "Half human," Caspian said, the words heavy. "Her mother was mortal. She died 3 years ago. That is when Ilara's words began to fade. After the funeral, they stopped completely." Leo lowered his face into his hands, trying to process. A vampire, a castle, a traumatized half-vampire child. It was a gothic novel sprung to life. "You truly believe I can help her?" "I believe you are the only one who can see what she feels. The therapists, they work in the dark. You have a light." His hand moved as if to take Leo's, then stopped, resting on the arm of the chair instead. "I am asking you to walk into the dark with that light. I am out of options. My child is disappearing into silence, and I would give anything to bring her back." The gold in his aura flared, bright and true. It was the aura of a parent facing the abyss. Leo took a deep, shuddering breath. The fear was still there, a live wire in his chest. But beneath it, the same reckless pull he'd felt on the subway was stronger. The chance to help. The chance to be more than a waiter drowning in debt. The chance, perhaps, to understand the beautiful, terrifying sadness in this impossible man. "If I do this," Leo said, his voice gaining strength, "there are rules. I'm not interested in being part of the vampire diet or a pet or whatever." "You are a person," Caspian said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You will be treated as such. Any who suggest otherwise will answer to me." And the money? 5,000 a week if you commute, 10 if you reside here, paid regardless of results. You are under no obligation to stay if it does not work. Leo looked around the cavernous, silent room. He thought of his dark, cold apartment. He thought of the eviction notice. He thought of the little girl who had lost her mother and then her voice. I want to meet her first, he said finally, before I decide anything. I need to see Ilara. Relief, stark and powerful, washed through Caspian's colors, turning the indigo momentarily luminous. Of course, she is in her solarium. He stood and offered his hand. After a heartbeat's hesitation, Leo took it. Caspian's skin was cool, smooth, and strong. He led him back through the maze of halls, up a grand staircase, to a wing of the house that felt different. The air was lighter. The colors on the walls were softer. The solarium was at the end of a hall, behind a door painted a soft, serene green. Caspian knocked. Ilara, there is someone I wish you to meet. No answer. He opened the door. The room was a burst of life and warmth. Sun streamed through a wall of arched glass, illuminating a miniature jungle of plants. There were bookshelves, a small table with art supplies, and a comfortable-looking sofa. In the center of the room, curled in a large pillowed window seat with a book in her lap, was a little girl. Ilara Thorne was tiny for 6, with a cloud of dark curly hair and skin so pale it seemed almost translucent. She wore a simple blue dress. She did not look up when they entered. Her entire posture was a closed door. But Leo saw her colors. He inhaled sharply. Oh. Because Ilara's aura was like nothing he had ever witnessed. It wasn't a single halo. It was a turbulent, constantly shifting nebula. Colors cycled through her with dizzying speed. Flashes of terrified crimson, deep oceans of sorrowful blue, violent storms of angry black, soft pulses of lavender confusion, and through it all, thin, bright filaments of desperate gold love. They tangled and twisted, a chaotic, beautiful, heartbreaking maelstrom of a feeling with no outlet. She had no way to express or understand. Caspian's gaze was fixed on Leo, watching his reaction. Ilara, he said softly, this is Leo. He is going to visit with us for a while. The girl did not move, but her colors spiked with a sharp defensive red. Fear. Leo moved slowly. He knelt on the sun-warmed rug, keeping a careful distance. He pulled a notebook and a pack of colored pencils from the small satchel he'd brought. He didn't speak to her directly at first. Instead, he chose a bright... Leo moved into Thornwood on a Tuesday, the sky a flat, uncommittal gray. He brought one suitcase containing his entire life, which looked pathetically small in the center of the bedroom he was given. The room was larger than his entire apartment, dominated by a 4-poster bed hung with heavy, embroidered drapes. A fireplace stood cold but ready, and French doors led to a small, private balcony overlooking the sprawling, misty gardens. It felt less like a bedroom and more like a set from a period drama where he was hopelessly miscast. Irina showed him the rules with chilly efficiency. The west wing was off limits after nightfall. The lower cellar doors were never to be opened. Meals were taken at specific times in the small dining room with Caspian and Ilara. His presence was expected, not requested. The small dining room, Irina discovered, could comfortably seat 30. Caspian sat at the head of a table long enough to host a jousting tournament, Ilara beside him on a cushioned booster seat. They left a place setting directly across from the little girl. For Leo. Thank you for joining us, Caspian said as a silent attendant pulled out Leo's chair. He was dressed in another impeccable dark suit, looking every inch of the lord of the manor. Consistency is important for Ilara. Shared meals are part of that structure. Ilara watched Leo with those huge, dark, too knowing eyes. Her aura today was a careful, neutral gray blue. Observation. Assessment. She was waiting to see if he would stay, if he was real, or just another adult who would eventually leave. Leo sat. A plate appeared before him, bearing food so artfully arranged it seemed a shame to disturb it. He looked from the perfect tiny vegetables to Caspian's impassive face. So, Leo said, because the silence was immense. "Do you actually eat, or is this just for my benefit?" A faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of Caspian's mouth. "We eat. We do not require sustenance as frequently as humans, but we can and do derive enjoyment from it. It also helps maintain appearances." "Nothing about this maintains appearances," Leo said, gesturing vaguely around the grand room. He turned to Ilara. "Your guardian is a vampire regent. You're you, and I'm a waiter who sees feelings as colors. I'd say we're the least normal dinner table in the entire city." Ilara's aura sparked, a flash of brilliant sunny yellow. Amusement. The corner of her mouth lifted just a millimeter. Not a smile, but its ghost. It was enough. The next week settled into a fragile, new rhythm. Leo learned the hidden rules of Thornwood. The staff, Irina, a few other attendants who moved with silent, preternatural grace, were all kindred. They weren't unfriendly, just detached. Old Finn, the groundskeeper who looked like a gnarled tree given human form, was the only one who offered a grunted greeting. The house itself felt alive in a strange, watchful way. Doors sometimes closed by themselves. The temperature in a room would shift for no reason. Once, Leo was looking for a specific book on botany for Alara, and as he ran his finger along the spines in the library, the very book he needed seemed to slide forward an inch, as if pushed. He focused on Ilara. Our days were structured, gentle. Mornings were for color lessons in the solarium. Leo brought paper and every art supply he could find. He didn't push for speech. He built a lexicon. Red for anger, a clenched fist of scribbles. Blue for sadness, a rain cloud, a drear drop. Yellow for happiness, a sun, a star, a smiling face. Green for fear, a shaking line of huddled shape. Purple for confusion, a tangled knot. Slowly, painstakingly, Ilara began to communicate. She would point to a color, then to herself, or to a drawing Leo had made. One day, she drew a woman with long yellow hair. She pointed to the woman, then to herself, then carefully, deliberately scribbled over the woman's face with a heavy black crayon. The page tore under the pressure. "Your mom," Leo said softly, his heart aching. "You miss your mom." Ilara nodded, her eyes glistening. She took a fresh paper, drew the woman again, this time lying down, with flowers around her, then drew small stick figure people in black, and a tiny, lonely stick figure version of herself off to the side, surrounded by a storm of dark blue and gray. "You felt alone at the funeral," Leo translated, his voice hushed. "You saw like no one saw how sad you were." Another nod. A single, perfect tear rolled down her cheek and splashed on the drawing, smudging the gray. Leo didn't hesitate. He opened his arms. Ilara stared at him for a long moment, her colors cycling through fear, longing, and deep sorrow. Then she all but fell into his embrace, her small body trembling. She didn't cry aloud. The tears were silent, soaking into his shirt. Her aura shifted from the stormy blues and blacks to a soft, weary lavender. Comfort, being held. "I see you," Leo whispered in her hair. "I see how much it hurts." That evening, he showed the drawings to Caspian in the regent's private study, a room of dark wood and smelled of old paper and sandalwood. Caspian stared at the images for a long, silent time. His own aura, usually so tightly controlled, churned with visible pain, slashes of black guilt, deep wells of indigo grief. "I didn't know," he said, finally, the words rough. "At the funeral, she was so quiet, so still. I believed, she was managing better than I was. I was consumed." "She was 6, Leo said gently, not letting him off the hook, but not condemning him either. "She didn't know how to show you, so she stopped showing anything at all." Caspian's hands clenched on the polished desk. "I failed her." "You're trying now. That's what matters. She's starting to let someone see. It's a crack in the wall." "What does she need from me?" The question was raw, stripped of all regal pretense. It was just a father, lost. Be there, Leo said. Not just in the room, be present. Show her what you feel. She needs to know it's safe to have big feelings because even the ancient, scary vampire in charge has them. Over the following weeks, Leo watched a transformation. Caspian started joining our color sessions. He would sit on the floor, looking impossibly large and out of place, and draw with them. His drawings were stark, dramatic. A figure in black surrounded by swirling storms, grief, a heavy chain, duty, a single bright gem hidden in a dark cave, love for Ilara. Ilara watched him with intense focus. One day, as Caspian drew himself as a shadow under a thundercloud, Ilara crawled over. She took a yellow crayon from Leo's hand and with great concentration drew a small, bright sun peeking out from behind his cloud. She pointed to the sun, then to her own chest. Caspian's breath caught. He looked from the drawing to his daughter's solemn face. "You make me happy?" he signed, his movements clumsy but earnest. Ilara nodded. She pointed to the shadowy figure, then to herself, and drew another smaller sun next to it. "You make me happy, too," Leo translated, his throat tight. Caspian reached out, his movements slow and deliberate, and pulled Ilara into his lap, holding her as if she were made of the most fragile glass. His aura blazed with a gold so pure and radiant it was like staring into the heart of a star. He looked at Leo over her head, his gray eyes shimmering with emotion too vast for words. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. But their fragile peace was shattered on a night when a cold rain lashed against the windows of Thornwood. Leo was reading in his room when a sound tore through the silent house, a high, thin, wordless scream of pure terror. He was out the door and sprinting down the hall before he could think. The sound led him to Ilara's bedroom. The door was open. Caspian was already there, trying to soothe her, but his touch seemed to make things worse. Ilara was sitting bolt upright in bed, her eyes wide and unseeing, screaming and screaming. Her aura was a violent, swirling tornado of livid red and sickly, poisoned green. Terror. Not just fear, but primal, gut-wrenching terror. "She's afraid of you," Leo realized, seeing the color spike violently whenever Caspian reached for her. Something scared her, and now that fear is attaching to everything. Caspian stepped back immediately, his face a mask of anguished helplessness. Leo approached the bed slowly, keeping his own colors as calm and soft as he could project. "Ilara, sweetheart, it's Leo. I'm here. Can you show me? Can you show me the bad thing?" The screaming cut off into ragged, hiccuping sobs. Ilara launched herself at Leo, her small arms locking around his neck like vice grips. She was trembling violently, her heart hammering against his chest like a trapped bird. She was pointing, not at Caspian, but at the window. Leo turned. He saw only darkness in the rivulets of rain on the glass. Then a flash of lightning lit up the grounds for a split second. Illuminated in the stark white light was a face, pressed against the window, paler than death, eyes glowing with a faint, hellish red, lips drawn back from elongated, needle-sharp fangs in a silent snarl. Leo's own scream lodged in his throat. Caspian moved. There was no blur, no dramatic effect. One moment he was by the bed, the next he was simply at the window, wrenching it open. The figure outside recoiled. Caspian Training to defend oneself against vampires, Leo quickly discovered, was an exercise in profound humility. It was one thing to know they were stronger and faster. It was another to experience it firsthand, repeatedly, as you were picked up and placed back on your feet like a toddler being corrected. "Again," Caspian said, not even breathing hard as Leo picked himself up from the thick training mats for what felt like the 100th time. They were in a converted ballroom in the East Wing, now stripped bare and outfitted as a gym. Mats covered the floor and racks held an array of practice weapons made of hardened wood and blunted silver. Leo gripped the wooden stake in his hand. It felt absurd, a child's toy against a force of nature. "This is pointless. You're holding back, and I still can't touch you. A real one won't hold back." "I am restraining my speed considerably," Caspian conceded, circling him with that eerie, silent grace. "But you are correct. A member of the Covenant will not.
So you must be faster, smarter. You must think like the prey that outwits the predator. That's a terrible motivational speech. A ghost of a smile touched Caspian's lips. You are doing better than most would. In the 2 weeks since the attack at the window, Thornwood had become a fortress. Unseen guards patrolled the grounds. Irina moved with even more clipped efficiency. Alara had withdrawn again, her colors muted and watchful. The easy progress they'd made felt fragile, threatened. During these sessions, Leo noticed something. When they sparred, even in these controlled conditions, Caspian's aura shifted. The ever present indigo loneliness receded. The silver control focused into a sharp, clear beam of concentration. The action, the purpose seemed to give him a respite from the weight of his centuries. He needed this, Leo realized, as much as Leo did. Show me again, Leo said, shaking out his aching wrist. The move you used last time, the disarm. Caspian demonstrated, a fluid motion too fast for Leo's eyes to follow. A step, a twist, and the practice stake was in Caspian's hand, not his. Leo frowned, not watching the movement, but the aura. He saw it. A microsecond before Caspian committed to the move, a specific ripple in the silver threads of his energy, a tightening of the gold focus. There, Leo pointed, your colors change right before you move. It's a tell. Caspian went completely still. No one has ever perceived that. No one else sees what I see. Show me. Show me what every vampire's aura does before they strike. If I can learn to read the patterns, I might be able to predict the movement, to be a half step ahead. Caspian's expression shifted. The respect in his aura warmed into something like admiration, tinged with that brilliant gold. That is insightful. You are adapting your gift as a weapon. I'm using what I have, Leo muttered, embarrassed. It is more than that, Caspian said, moving closer. Not a threat, but a presence. You perceive the world in a layer of truth the rest of us are blind to. It makes you dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with stakes or strength. Before Leo could formulate a response to that, the heavy door to the training room swung open. Irina stood there, her aura a spike of cold, alarmed silver. Regent, the conclave has arrived. They are assembled in the Grand Hall and are demanding audience. Caspian's aura instantly frosted over, the warmth vanishing into a glacier-cold authority. Now? They brought representatives from the old families. They are insistent. Caspian swore softly, a rare human sound. Stay here, he said to Leo, his tone leaving no room for argument. But the way Irina's eyes flicked to Leo, her aura flashing with a red slice of hostility, told Leo it concerned him very much. The conclave, Leo learned by peering through a crack in the service door to the Grand Hall, was the formal ruling council of the local kindred. They sat at a massive semicircular table of black obsidian, 13 vampires whose auras radiated age, power, and severe disapproval. Caspian took the central seat, the throne-like chair that was clearly his. Leo slipped into the shadows of an upper gallery, a balcony meant for musicians, now empty. The hall was lit by massive iron chandeliers holding flickering witchlight, a cold blue-white illumination that the kindred seemed to prefer. A vampire with hair the color of tarnished silver and an aura of dried blood brown spoke first. Caspian, we must address the matter of your mortal. The way he said mortal sounded like vermin. Caspian's voice was calm, deadly. Lord Malatai, if you have concerns, articulate them. You have introduced a human into your sanctum, granted it access to the air, allowed it to influence her development. It is unprecedented, dangerous. He is helping my ward find his voice, Caspian replied, his tone icy. That is all that matters. A younger vampire, her aura swirling with envious green and ambitious purple, cut in. It sends a message that humans are our equals, that they belong in our spaces. They do not. In my world, Caspian said, his voice dropping to a soft, dangerous register, anyone who aids my family is welcome. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, accusations flying. Humans are sustenance, not companions. You make us appear weak. The ancient codes forbid this intimacy.
Leo watched the auras in the room spiral into a tornado of hostile colors. Then he saw it. Near the back, a vampire he didn't recognize. His aura was wrong. It wasn't just emotional color, it had a texture, a sticky, invasive quality. Dark bruise like purple threaded with a sickly, magical green. And those threads weren't just surrounding the vampire, they were reaching out like thin, poisonous vines, seeking Caspian, seeking the other council members. Influence, compulsion. Someone was using magic on them. Leo moved without thinking. He left the gallery, descended a servant stair, and stepped out of a side entrance directly onto the main floor of the hall. The arguing voices faltered, then died as all eyes turned to Leo. Caspian's expression flashed from anger to acute concern. Leo, I instructed you to remain here. I know, Leo interrupted, his heart hammering, but someone in this room is using magic, a compulsion spell, aimed at you, at all of you, him. The accused vampire's aura flared violently, panic, guilt. He moved to bolt, a blur of motion. He didn't make it 2 steps. Caspian was on him. It wasn't the controlled speed of their training sessions. It was pure, unleashed violence. He slammed the vampire against the stone wall with a crack that echoed through the silent hall. What have you done? The vampire thrashed. Nothing! The mortal lies! Leo walked closer, the eyes of the ancient kindred upon him. He could see the spell clearly now, the dark threads anchoring to a small, pulsating amulet in the vampire's inner pocket. It's a talisman, in his pocket. It's feeding on discord, amplifying suspicion and anger. Caspian's hand shot into the pocket and withdrew a black stone, covered with faintly glowing, ugly sigils. The moment it left the vampire's person, the dark, sticky threads in the auras of the council members dissipated. They blinked, looking around with dazed confusion. Lady Malachi shook her head, her dried blood aura clearing to a more natural, if stern, silver. What just happened? You were spelled, Leo said, his voice stronger now. Someone wanted this meeting to end in conflict, wanted you to turn on each other, on him. He nodded to Caspian. The room's attention turned to the captive vampire, now held immobile by Caspian's grip. Who gave you this? Caspian's voice was deadly quiet. Who in the Covenant ordered you to sabotage my conclave? The vampire remained silent, his aura a knot of fear and defiance. Caspian's free hand moved to the vampire's throat, his fingers flexing. Speak, or I will demonstrate why challenging a regent is the last mistake you will ever make. The defiance broke. The Crimson Covenant. They said you were vulnerable, that the human was a crack in your armor. They wanted the conclave to remove you. Caspian threw him toward guards who materialized from the shadows. Take him to the containment cells. We will continue this discussion later. As the vampire was dragged away, Caspian turned back to the conclave. His aura was pure, unassailable authority now, a pillar of brilliant gold and deep, commanding blue. Let this be unequivocally clear, he said, his voice ringing in the vast space. Leo is under my protection. He is aiding my heir. Anyone who threatens him threatens Ilera, and anyone who threatens my child will answer to me personally. Is that understood? The conclave members nodded, their auras subdued, showing shock, respect, and a newfound wariness. As the council filed out, Irina appeared at Leo's side, her usual coldness replaced with something like begrudging appraisal. You identified a Shadow Weaver's spell. None of us sensed it. I just saw the colors, Leo said, exhausted. Anyone with synesthesia could have. No, Irina's pale eyes held his. Anyone with your condition might see emotion. You saw active magic. That is a different gift, a rarer one. Before Leo could formulate a response to that, Caspian was there. He took Leo's arm, his touch firm. Thank you. You should not have been exposed to that. I'm sorry. I'm not, Leo said, meeting his gaze. If I'm staying, I need to know what we're up against. We, Caspian repeated, the words seeming to surprise him. His aura warmed. Yes, we are up against the Crimson Covenant, traditionalists who wish to return to an age of predation. My recognizing you as
Together, hung in the air of the grand hall, a simple, profound truth spoken by a child who understood more than anyone. In the weeks that followed, together became their unspoken motto. It was in the way Caspian now joined their color lessons not as an observer, but as a participant, his large, elegant hands clumsy but earnest with crayons. It was in the way Leo found himself included in Caspian's evening briefings, his human perspective on security and routine becoming valued, not just tolerated. It was in the shared, silent meals where Ilara's gaze would dart between them, her aura a soft, contented periwinkle. Ilara's progress, once a fragile seedling, began to grow with the fierce tenacity of a weed breaking through stone. The dam of silence didn't burst, it developed a leak. First, it was sounds, a soft hum while drawing, a sigh of frustration when a crayon broke, then whispers, so faint Leo had to lean in to hear. One morning, as Leo was organizing their colors, he held up a bright yellow card. Happy, he said clearly. Ilara, concentrating on connecting two puzzle pieces, didn't look up, but her lips moved. A breathy, almost inaudible sound escaped. Appy. Leo froze. Caspian, who was pretending to read a newspaper across the room, went preternaturally still, the paper lowering an inch. Leo didn't make a big deal. He simply smiled. Yes, happy. He held up a blue card. Sad. Ilara glanced at it, then back at her puzzle. Sad. That evening at dinner, Caspian carefully signed, "The soup is good." He'd been practicing relentlessly. Ilara looked at his hands, then at his hopeful face. She opened her mouth, took a small breath, and said, in a clear, small, rusty voice, "Yes." The word dropped into the quiet dining room like a pebble into a still pond. Caspian's aura didn't just brighten, it shattered into a supernova of gold and silver joy, so intense Leo had to look away, his own eyes stinging. Caspian's hand, holding his spoon, trembled minutely. He didn't speak. He just looked at his daughter, his entire ancient being focused on that single, miraculous word. The floodgates, once cracked, could not be closed. Words returned, slow and careful, as if Ilara were testing each one for safety. Yes, no, please, thank you, tired, hungry. Then phrases. Can I have more? I don't like that. Where is Leo? But her primary language remained the colors. She saw the world as Leo did, but for her it was even more fundamental, more intertwined with her half-kindred nature. One afternoon, she tugged on Leo's sleeve as he was reviewing a security schedule with Caspian, her small finger tapping a specific name, a minor lord who was due to visit. Bad green, she whispered, her voice still soft. Sick green. Leo looked at the name, then at Caspian. She's sensing duplicity, malice. Caspian's eyes narrowed. He cross-referenced the name with another list. He has ties to a merchant guild that was recently investigated for smuggling embargoed materials, materials useful for crafting certain prohibited weapons. The visit was quietly canceled. It was the first of many times Ilara's perception, guided by Leo's understanding, became an early warning system for Thornwood. She wasn't just healing, her unique gift was blossoming into a powerful, intuitive tool. It was during this period of growth that the first gift arrived, not from Caspian, but delivered by a nervous-looking young vampire courier to the gates. It was a small, polished wooden box. Inside, nestled on black velvet, were a pair of spectacles. The frames were a light silvery metal, delicate and elegant. But the lenses? The lenses were clear, yet when Leo held them up, they seemed to subtly prism the light. A note, written in an elegant, spidery hand, accompanied them. For the teacher who helps us see ourselves, these will help you manage the glare. An admirer from the Grove of Whispers. The Grove, Caspian said, examining the glasses with a mix of awe and caution when Leo showed them. They are an order of kindred scholars, historians, and mystics, neutral, reclusive. For them to take notice, he handed the glasses back. They are safe, enchanted, but not malicious.
They will help you filter overwhelming visual stimuli, a tool, not a trap. Tentatively, Leo put them on. The world didn't darken, but the intense, often overwhelming blaze of auras around him became softer, becoming more clear, more distinct, less painful. It was like turning down a deafening noise to a listenable volume. He could still see every detail, but now he could focus. He looked at Caspian and saw the complex tapestry of his emotions with new clarity. He looked at Ilara and could differentiate the individual threads of her joy from her lingering anxiety. It's incredible, he breathed. They recognize your value, Caspian said, his gaze intense. As do I. The second gift was for Ilara. A week later, a small live delivery arrived, a sapling in a ceramic pot, its leaves a peculiar silvery green. The note this time read, "A moonlight willow for the young seer. Its leaves will always show their true color, regardless of the light. May your path always be true." Ilara was enchanted. She insisted the tree live in her solarium. As she cared for it, talking to it in her soft, returning voice, Leo noticed something. When Ilara was near the willow, her own chaotic aura seemed to calm, the colors settling into more harmonious patterns. The tree, it seemed, had a gentle, stabilizing magic of its own. These gifts were a turning point. They were a silent, powerful endorsement from one of the most respected factions of the kindred world. The murmurs against Leo's presence didn't cease, but they were drowned out by a new, curious respect. Invitations began to arrive, not for parties, but for scholarly discussions, for consultations on human kindred relations. Leo, the exhausted waiter, was becoming Leo, the advisor, the teacher, the bridge. And through it all, his bond with Caspian deepened in a way that defied simple labels. It was built on a foundation of shared purpose, Ilara's well-being. It was fortified by mutual respect, Leo's courage and perception, Caspian's strength and loyalty. It was warmed by a companionship that filled a loneliness in both of them that they hadn't fully acknowledged. One evening, they were in the library, Caspian researching an obscure point of border law, Leo helping Ilara with a children's book about constellations. Ilara pointed to a picture of two stars close together. "Like you and Leo," she said, matter-of-factly. Caspian looked up from his tome. I felt a flush creep up my neck. "Why do you say that, little star?" Caspian asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Your colors," Ilara said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She made a weaving motion with her hands. "They go together now. His blue is in your gold. Your silver is in my green. They fit." She went back to her book, leaving the two men in a thick, charged silence. The truth of her childish observation hung between them, undeniable. Their auras had begun to resonate, to intertwine at the edges when they were in the same room, a silent, luminous dialogue. Later, after Ilara was asleep, they found themselves on the same balcony where they'd stood after the window attack. The city lights glittered below, a terrestrial mirror of the starry sky above. "She sees too much," Caspian murmured, leaning on the stone railing. "I see the truth," Leo replied, standing beside him. "It's confusing." "It is," Caspian agreed. He turned to face Leo, his pale eyes serious in the moonlight. "What we are building here has no precedent in my world. A regent and a mortal bound not by blood or covenant, but by this." He gestured between them, a vague but encompassing motion. "It makes you a target. It complicates everything." "I know. And yet," Caspian said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "the thought of this house without you in it now feels like a step back into the cold, a return to a silence I no longer wish to bear." Leo's heart hammered. This was as close to a declaration as someone like Caspian could make. It wasn't about romance. It was about essential need, about a place in the world becoming a home because of a person. "I'm not going anywhere," Leo said, the promise solid in his chest. "The covenants, the politics, the complications, they're just noise. Ilara needs us, and I need this. I need to be here." Caspian studied his face for a long moment, as if memorizing it. Then he simply nodded, a sharp, decisive motion. Then here you shall stay. He reached out, not for Leo's hand, but placed his palm briefly, firmly against Leo's chest, over his heart. A grounding, possessive, protective gesture that spoke more than any kiss ever could. The touch was cool, but the intent behind it burned. In that moment, under the indifferent stars, an unbreakable pact was forged. They were a unit now, a family, and they would face whatever came next together. The piece, like a delicate glass ornament, was destined to be tested. The endorsement from the Grove of Whispers had enraged the Crimson Covenant. Silence from Thornwood was seen as weakness. Recognition from neutral powers was an intolerable provocation. The first real strike was not against the house, but against its connections. Leo received a panicked call from the manager of the diner where he'd once worked. The place had been trashed in the night, not a robbery, but a vandalism of peculiar, terrifying precision. All the windows were shattered from the inside. The refrigeration units were fried, their wiring melted in a way no electrician could explain. And on the wall behind the counter, scrawled in what smelled like coppery, spoiled paint, was a single word: collaborator. Leo's past was being used as a weapon. Caspian's fury was a quiet, terrifying thing. He dispatched guards and cleaners, paid for all damages anonymously, and offered the staff paid leave, but the message was sent and received. The second strike was more direct. One of the young kindred guards, sympathetic to the Covenant's cause, was caught trying to tamper with the moonlight willow in Ilara's solarium. He wasn't trying to steal it. He was attempting to infect its soil with a blight that would have reflected a curse back onto Ilara. Irina intercepted him. The subsequent questioning revealed the Covenant was planning a move they called the Crimson Hour, a public, undeniable demonstration that Caspian's rule was flawed, that his mortal infection would be his downfall. They want a spectacle, Caspian told Leo in his inner circle in the map room. The glowing three-dimensional representation of the city hovered over the table. They will strike during the Equinox Gathering. The Equinox Gathering was a rare, semi-public event. Kindred from allied houses and a few carefully vetted, powerful human allies would be at Thornwood. It was a show of strength and unity. They wouldn't dare attack here with so many witnesses. Irina said it, though her aura betrayed doubt. They will dare precisely because of the witnesses, Caspian countered, his finger tracing a path on the map. They want to show the conclave, the grove, everyone, that my security is penetrable, that my judgment is compromised. They will aim for maximum symbolism. His pale eyes lifted and locked on Leo. They will try to take you, or Ilara, in the heart of my home, during my most public event. That is their statement. A cold knot tightened in Leo's stomach. What do we do? We prepare, Caspian said, his voice gaining the hard, strategic edge of the general he had once been. To turn their spectacle into ours. But to do that, Leo, you cannot be a passive target. You must be prepared to be in the eye of the storm. The training intensified. It was no longer about basic defense. It was about tactics, about using Leo's gift offensively. Caspian, with Irina and a few utterly loyal guards, would project specific, intense emotions: blinding rage, paralyzing fear, seductive calm, and Leo, wearing his Grove-gifted glasses, had to learn to identify them, to shield his own mind from their influence, and to pinpoint the source within a crowd. He learned that fear aura felt like cold, green needles against his skin. Rage was a red, suffocating heat. Enchantment was a slippery, purple fog. He practiced pushing back with his own will, visualizing a wall of cool, clear blue light around himself and Ilara. Ilara, sensing the tension, stopped speaking again.
But this silence was different. It wasn't a retreat, it was a gathering of focus. She followed Leo everywhere, her small hand often finding his. Her aura was a shield of fierce gold protection around him, and she began to point out bad colors in the auras of the staff and guards with unnerving accuracy, identifying two more Covenant sympathizers they had missed. The night of the equinox gathering arrived. Thornwood was transformed. The gardens were lit with thousands of floating witch lights. The grand hall was open, filled with music that was elegant and subtly hypnotic. Kindred and gorgeous archaic finery mingled with a handful of important humans who moved through the crowd with the dazed, thrilled expression of those who know they are seeing magic. Leo stood at Caspian's side, wearing formal clothes that had been tailored for him. He felt like an imposter. The Grove's glasses were on his face, allowing him to navigate the sea of intense, dazzling auras without being overwhelmed. Ilara was between them, a tiny, solemn figure in a dress of deep blue, holding Caspian's hand and leaning against Leo's leg. Caspian was the picture of regal control, but Leo, standing so close, could see the tension in the set of his jaw, could feel the hyper-vigilant silver-shot energy radiating from him. His gaze constantly scanned the room, not with his eyes, but with his other senses. The attack, when it came, was not a frontal assault. It was a masterpiece of misdirection. First, all the witch lights in the garden snuffed out at once, plunging that section of the party into darkness and causing a wave of startled cries. The kindred guards stationed there moved instantly, but in that moment of collective distraction, three things happened inside the hall. The music skewed, the elegant melody twisting into a discordant, mind-numbing drone that made several humans clutch their heads. A sonic attack aimed to disorient. Simultaneously, from the vents, a thin, sweet-smelling mist began to seep, a compulsion fog, designed to instill passive suggestibility. And from within the crowd itself, six figures shed their glamours. They weren't disguised as guests, they had been glamored as pieces of statuary, as part of the wall tapestries. They moved not with vampire speed, but with a strange, jerky, insectile haste, their auras not the complex colors of emotion, but a uniform, sickly, mindless crimson. Thralls, humans or lesser vampires whose minds were utterly enslaved by Covenant magic. Their target was clear. They ignored the screaming, stumbling guests. They converged on the dais where Caspian, Leo, and Ilara stood. Leo, the shield, Caspian barked, shoving Ilara behind him. Leo didn't think. He grabbed Ilara's hand and focused, pouring his will into the mental exercise they'd practiced. He visualized the clear blue wall, pushing it out to encompass the three of them. He felt the discordant music slam against it, a physical pressure. He felt the seductive mist slither and recoil. The thralls hit the barrier and staggered back, confused, their programmed instructions conflicting with the unexpected obstacle. But the barrier wouldn't hold against physical force for long. Two of the thralls began to pound on it with fists that looked unnaturally hardened. Caspian moved. He became a vortex of controlled violence. He didn't fight the thralls, he dismantled them. A precise strike to a knee, a twist of a wrist, a throw that sent a body crashing into two others. He was protecting his ground, not pursuing. His focus was on the source. Leo, maintaining the shield, used his gift. He looked past the thralls, past the panicking crowd, searching for the guiding intelligence behind the attack. The thralls' crimson auras all had a single, thin black thread leading back, like puppeteer strings. His eyes followed the threads. There, in the musicians' gallery, a figure cloaked in shadows, its aura a concentrated knot of malignant purple and black. The Shadow Weaver, a master of compulsion and control. Caspian, the gallery, the Weaver. Caspian's head snapped up. He saw the figure,
But between him and the gallery was a wall of panicked nobles and 6 more thralls who had entered through a side door. "I can disrupt him," Leo shouted. He had never tried this, but he understood the theory. The weaver's control was an emotional tapestry, a weave of fear, obedience, and rage. If Leo could fire a spike of a counter-emotion, pure, defiant will, directly down those black threads, he dropped the shield. Immediately, the noise and the mist assaulted him. He gritted his teeth, focused on the weaver's vile purple aura, and pushed. He didn't send a color, he sent a concept. The image of Ilara's yellow sun drawing, the feeling of Caspian's hand on his shoulder on the subway, the warmth of together. A lance of pure, clean gold light, visible only to those who could see such things, shot across the chaotic hall and struck the weaver's aura. The weaver screamed, a high, psychic shriek that cut through the discordant music. The black threads connecting him to the thralls snapped. The thralls froze, then collapsed like marionettes with cut strings. The mist dissipated. The music died. In the sudden, ringing silence, all eyes turned to the gallery. The weaver, revealed, clutched his head. Caspian was already there, hauling the weaver over the railing for the stunned assembly to see. The Crimson Covenant, Caspian's voice amplified by his power, rolled through the hall. They attacked.
The fallout from the Equinox attack was swift and seismic. The captured Shadow Weaver, under the intense and non-negotiable scrutiny of the Conclave, revealed a web of Covenant operatives within the city's kindred society. Purges were subtle but thorough. Caspian's authority, once challenged, was now cemented in steel. The public display of loyalty between him, his heir, and his human advisor became legend, a modern myth in the making. But a new challenge arose, one not of swords and spells, but of law and legacy. The ancient foundational codes of the kindred, the Lex Noctis, had no provisions for a human holding a position of trust and influence within a regent's household. Leo's status was an anomaly, a crack in centuries of tradition. The more conservative members of the conclave, while cowed by Caspian's display of power, began a quieter, more insidious campaign. They spoke of precedent, of the sanctity of their laws, of the danger of blurring lines that were meant to protect both species. "They will use the law to force him out," Irina reported grimly, standing before Caspian's desk. "A formal petition has been circulated. They demand a hearing before the full conclave to determine the legal standing of the mortal, Leo, within a sovereign kindred household. They cite statutes on contamination, on the purity of the bloodline succession." Caspian's expression was granite. "Ilara's progress is his legal standing. The safety of this house is his legal standing." "They do not see it that way, Regent. They see a loophole that must be closed before others try to exploit it. They fear a world where humans are not just protected, but integrated." Leo, listening from a chair by the fire, felt the old cold fear return. He had survived a physical attack. Could he survive a legal one? Could paperwork and ancient words undo everything? "There is one path," Irina said slowly, her pale eyes shifting to Leo. "The Grove of Whispers." Caspian's head lifted. "The Grove does not involve itself in political disputes." "No, but they are the ultimate arbiters of the Lex Noctis. They are the living memory, its interpreters. If they were to recognize Leo, not as an exception, but as a new category, to issue a finding on his unique nature and its place within our world, the conclave would be forced to accept it. Their word is law, above even yours in matters of interpretation." Caspian said, "The Grove does not grant audiences lightly," but a spark had ignited in his eyes.
and they would not do so for political convenience. They might, Irina countered, for knowledge, for a chance to study a human with true perception who can not only see emotion, but interact with magical energy. They gifted him tools. They are already interested. A plan, dangerous and brilliant, began to form. They would not ask the Grove to save Leo. They would invite the Grove to study him, and in doing so, force a judgment on what he was. The invitation was sent not on parchment, but on a leaf of the moonlight willow, its silvery veins holding the message in enchanted ink. The reply came not by courier, but by the leaf itself curling into a scroll and whispering the answer in Caspian's ear. The Grove will receive the seer and his guide at the next dark moon. His guide? Asked Leo, confused when Caspian told him. They mean me, Caspian said. You as the primary subject, the seer. I am merely the one who guides you to them. It is a sign of respect for you. The journey to the Grove was not a physical one to a distant forest. The Grove of Whispers existed in a pocket dimension, a fold in reality, accessible only through specific hidden gateways. Their gateway was in the oldest part of Thornwood's library, behind a bookshelf that swung away to reveal a door of living, polished oak engraved with phases of the moon. Stepping through was like walking into a living cathedral of trees. The air was cool, damp, and smelled of rich earth and ozone. Giant, ancient trees formed a vaulted ceiling hundreds of feet above, their branches intertwined. Bioluminescent moss and floating globes of soft light provided illumination. Paths of smooth white stone wound between massive roots. It was silent, but not empty. The silence was watchful, intelligent. They were met by three figures, not vampires as Leo understood them. These beings seemed made of wood and shadow and starlight. Their skin resembled bark, their hair like cascading moss, their eyes the gentle glow of foxfire. They were the arboreals, the keepers of the grove. No words were spoken aloud. A wave of calm, curious intention washed over Leo and Caspian, an invitation to follow. They were led to a clearing where a ring of ancient stones stood. Seated on the stones or floating in the air were more arboreals, perhaps 22. At the center of the ring grew a tree unlike any other. Its trunk was silver, its leaves were tiny, shimmering lights, and its roots delved into a pool of water so clear it seemed to hold the night sky within it. A voice spoke in their minds, gentle but immense, like the rustling of a forest. We have observed the ripple in the pattern, little seer, the human who sees the weave of emotion and will. Show us. This was the test, not of combat, but of essence. Caspian gave a slight, encouraging nod. Leo took a deep breath. He removed the Grove's glasses, letting his perception open fully to this strange, magical place. And he saw. The Grove was not just a place, it was a living network of energy. The auras of the arboreals were not the colors of emotion, but the colors of purpose, deep greens of guardianship, bright golds of knowledge, serene blues of memory. The silver tree pulsed with a heartbeat of pure, silver-white magic. The very air was thread with ley lines of soft, shimmering power. He didn't just see it, he felt it. The Grove was reading him as he was reading it. It was a mutual unveiling. You perceive the emotional layer, and the layer beneath, the intentional layer, the magical signature. You differentiate the fear spell from the fear emotion. This is rare. An arboreal floated closer. It extended a hand of gnarled wood. In its palm was a simple stone. What do you see? Leo looked. The stone had no aura of its own, but around it he saw three distinct, overlapping fields. a faint, clingy gray of simple age, a sharp red imprint of violence. It had been used as a weapon long ago, and a recent gentle touch of curiosity from the arboreal holding it. "It's old," Leo said, his voice small in the vast quiet. "It hurt someone once, and you've been studying it recently." The arboreal's foxfire eyes brightened. "Accurate." Another test. They presented him with a vial of liquid that swirled with internal clouds. And this. Leo saw no color from the liquid itself, but he saw the effect. The arboreal's aura was being subtly manipulated, a thread of its calm blue being gently pulled towards a more focused, analytical silver by proximity to the vial. It's a focusing agent. It doesn't have emotion, but it channels intention. It helps you concentrate. A ripple of approval moved through the ring. For hours, they tested him. They showed him objects imbued with complex histories, with trapped echoes of joy, grief, rage. They had him distinguish between a genuine feeling and a magically induced one. They observed as he and Caspian stood together, and the arboreals murmured at the sight of their resonating auras, the way Leo's human warmth softened Caspian's ancient coldness, the way Caspian's strength provided a structure for Leo's perception. Finally, the central silver tree's light pulsed strongly. The collective mind voice spoke again. "The mortal known as Leo possesses the gift of true perception, degree unprecedented in recorded history. He perceives not only the emotional spectrum, but the intentional and resonant magical fields. His presence in the Thorn household is not a contamination of the bloodline, but a complementary augmentation. He acts as a stabilizer for the young heir's nascent gift, and a translator of intent for the regent. Therefore, by the authority of the Grove of Whispers, interpreters of the Lex Noctis, we hereby recognize a new designation, Human Adjutant, Grade Singularis. This designation confers upon the bearer, Leo, legal standing within kindred society equivalent to a sworn shield brother, sister, with all attendant rights and protections." The pronouncement hung.
The cutting from the grove's silver tree, planted in a pot of enchanted soil in Leo's sitting room, did not just grow, it thrived. Within a week, it had tripled in size, its trunk developing a subtle, luminous sheen, its leaves shimmering with captured moonlight even in the daytime. It became a focal point, a living symbol of the legitimacy and peace they had won. Alara loved it, often sitting quietly beside it, her chaotic aura smoothing into serene patterns under its influence. With the legal and political threats neutralized, a new, profound normality settled over Thornwood. It was a normality built on extraordinary foundations, but it felt, for the first time, sustainable. Leo's role evolved organically. He was the adjutant, teacher, confidant, and the emotional core of their small, powerful family. He worked with Caspian on diplomatic correspondence, his human perspective invaluable in navigating mortal institutions. He continued Alara's lessons, which now blended color theory with basic kindred history and ethics. And in the evenings, they were simply three people sharing a home, reading in the library, walking in the gardens, playing simple board games, where Caspian's centuries of strategic mind were often baffled by the sheer luck involved in rolling dice. The bonds between Leo and Caspian deepened into something wordless and absolute. It was in the way Caspian would materialize a cup of tea exactly when Leo's energy began to flag. It was in the way Leo instinctively knew when the weight of ancient memories pressed too heavily on Caspian and would draw him into a conversation about something trivial and modern. It was in the silent communication of glances across a room, in the comfortable proximity as they worked, in the unshakable trust that had been forged in crisis. It was also, Leo had to admit to himself one quiet afternoon, love. Not a human love of passion and drama, but something older, deeper, and more enduring. a love of chosen kinship, of profound respect, of two shattered pieces finding that together they formed a whole stronger than the original parts. He saw it reflected in the ever-present gold, now permanently woven into the fabric of Caspian's aura, a warmth that was not there the night on the subway. He knew Caspian felt it too. The regent was a creature of action, not poetry. His love was shown in deeds, in the sheer constancy of his presence. It was in the way he had rewritten the rules of his world for Leo. It was enough, more than enough. It was Alara, now chattering with a vocabulary that grew daily, who gave voice to the unspoken. They were in the solarium, the moonlight willow and the young silver tree placed side by side. Alara was drawing a picture. She drew 3 figures, a tall one in black and gray, a smaller one in blue, and one in between in green and gold. She connected them all with a web of bright yellow lines. "Our family," she announced, pointing. "Daddy, me, Leo." She tapped the yellow lines. "Our together lights." Caspian, who was examining a report, looked up. His eyes softened as he took in the drawing. "It is a perfect likeness, little star." Alara looked from him to Leo, her head tilted. "Are you and Leo going to get bonded, like in the old stories? Forever bonded?" The question hung in the sun-drenched room. Leo's pencil stilled. Caspian carefully set down his papers. "The forever bond is a kindred right, Alara," Caspian said, his voice carefully measured. "It is very serious. It links 2 souls for all their existence." "I know," Alara said, as if he were being deliberately obtuse. "That's why you should do it. Then Leo's light is part of our house forever, not just because the Grove says so, because you say so." She went back to coloring, leaving another seismic silence in her wake. She had a knack for it. Later, in Caspian's study, the weight of her words lingered. Leo was helping to catalog some newly acquired historical texts. The quiet between them was comfortable but charged. "She is perceptive," Caspian said, finally, not looking up from a fragile manuscript. "She sees what's real," Leo replied, tracing the embossed cover of a book. Caspian was silent for a long moment. Then he lifted his gaze. "The forever bond, the eternum vinculum, it is not undertaken lightly. It is a merging of essence, a sharing of life force. For a kindred, it is eternal. For a human," he trailed off, the unspoken truth heavy between them. "For a human, it would still be bound by a mortal lifespan. It would be a promise with a known, painful expiry date." "I know," Leo said softly. "I've thought about it, the limit. It is not a small thing to ask, to bind yourself to someone knowing you will leave them to centuries of grief. It's not a small thing to offer either, to share your eternity, knowing my part of it is just a chapter." Caspian stood and came around the desk. He stood before Leo, his expression more vulnerable than Leo had ever seen it. "Leo, what Alara said, the idea of your light being part of this house forever, it is not an idea. It is my deepest desire." He reached out, his cool fingers brushing a strand of hair from Leo's forehead, a touch so tender it stole Leo's breath. He looked up at him, into those pale gray eyes that held galaxies of loneliness and hope. He thought of his life before, the exhaustion, the fear, the gray nothingness of simply surviving. He thought of the colors now, the purpose, the profound sense of belonging. He thought of Alara's laugh, of Arena's grudging respect, of the quiet power of this man who had become his anchor. "You're not asking," Leo said, his voice firm with a certainty that came from the very core of him. "I'm offering. My mortal life, however long it is, I want it to be here, with you, with her. I want to be bound to this house, to your essence or whatever the magic is. I don't want to be the human adjutant who eventually retires and moves to the countryside. I want to be part of Thornwood forever, in whatever way I can, even if forever for me is only 60 more years." Caspian's hand stilled against his face.
His aura, usually so controlled, swirled in a torrent of gold and silver, and a hope so fierce it was blinding. You would choose this, knowing the end. I'm choosing the middle, Leo corrected, placing his hand over Caspian's. The part that matters. The end, we'll face that when it comes. Together, too. For a long moment, Caspian simply looked at him, as if memorizing every detail. Then he nodded, a single decisive motion. Then we will perform the eternum vinculum at the next lunar convergence. It will be private, only us, Ilara, and Irina as witness. The bond will be real, regardless of what the world sees. The lunar convergence was a week away. In that time, a new, gentle anticipation hummed through Thornwood. Alara was ecstatic, her aura a constant sunburst. Irina, tasked with preparing the ritual space in the oldest, most secure chamber below the house, treated the duty with a solemnity that bordered on reverence. The night arrived. The chamber was a circular room of bare stone, lit only by candles that burned with a steady blue flame. Symbols were chalked on the floor in a complex, interlocking pattern. In the center were two simple cushions. Leo wore a plain, dark robe. Caspian wore a similar one, the fabric looking ancient. Ilara, holding Irina's hand, watched with huge, serious eyes from the doorway. There were no lengthy vows. The ritual was about essence, not poetry. Caspian guided Leo to sit across from him in the center of the symbols. He took a small silver atham and with utmost care made a tiny incision on his own palm, then on Leo's. He clasped their hands together, their blood mingling. "My life is long," Caspian intoned, his voice resonating in the stone chamber. "My life is brief," Leo responded, the words feeling both strange and right. Caspian's free hand came up to cradle the side of Leo's neck. He leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "Let the streams merge, let the bond be forged, not for dominion, but for kinship, not for power, but for home. Eternum vinculum." As he spoke the final words, Leo felt it. A warmth, not physical, but spiritual, blossomed from the point where their hands were joined and where their foreheads touched. It flowed into him, a river of cool silver strength, of ancient resilience, of profound, patient love. And from him, he felt something flow out, a warmth, a vibrant golden light, the energy of mortal hope, of fleeting joy, of passionate determination. Their auras, visible to both of them in the charged space, did not just intertwine, they fused. The indigo and silver of Caspian and the green and gold of Leo swirled together, blending into a new, unique color, a deep, vibrant teal shot through with strands of brilliant platinum and warm, living gold. It was beautiful. It was them. The sensation was overwhelming, but not painful. It was like coming home to a home he'd never known he had. He could feel Caspian's presence in his mind, not as an intruder, but as a quiet, steady background hum.
Ears are curious things. In the outside world, they pass with the relentless march of seasons and headlines. In Thornwood, they passed in a series of moments, each one deepening the roots of the life they had built. Alara grew, not just taller, but into her powers. By 10, she could not only see auras with Leo's clarity, but could sometimes, with great focus, project simple emotional tones, a wave of calming blue to soothe a frightened animal, a spark of encouraging gold for a struggling student. She became a bridge in her own right, often acting as a gentle intermediary between the kindred staff and the few human consultants who now worked regularly with the house. Her voice, once lost, was now used with thoughtful precision, and her laughter was the most cherished sound within the ancient walls. Leo's role as adjutant became formalized in ways both large and small. He established and ran the Thornwood Foundation, a charitable organization that discreetly aided humans caught in the crossfire of kindred conflicts and funded research into peaceful coexistence. He became a sought-after advisor, not just for Caspian, but for other progressive regents who were navigating the new, delicate era his very existence had helped usher in. The title Human Adjutant Grade Singularis was no longer an oddity, it was a respected position, and he trained others who showed potential, creating a small cadre of human aides who served in various kindred households. The bond between them, the eternum vinculum, was their private bedrock. It allowed them to share strength without words. When Leo faced a frustrating diplomatic deadlock, he could feel Caspian's steady patience bolster his own. When the weight of centuries of memory threatened to pull Caspian into melancholy, Leo's vibrant present tense joy would gently tug him back. They were two halves of a single shield, protecting their home and their daughter. The Crimson Covenant was not gone, but it was fractured, driven to the deepest shadows. Their ideology was slowly becoming a relic, unable to compete with the tangible evidence of a household that was stronger, wiser, and more harmonious precisely because of its human heart. One autumn evening, many years after the subway, Leo stood on the familiar balcony. The silver tree from the grove was now a tall, beautiful presence in a corner of the garden below, its light a soft beacon. He felt, rather than heard, Caspian come to stand beside him. "You're thinking about time," Caspian said softly. It wasn't a question. Through the bond, he could feel the particular bittersweet tinge to Leo's emotions. Leo nodded. He was in his 40s now. The first strands of silver touched his hair. He was healthy, vital, but undeniably mortal. Caspian looked exactly as he had the night they met. The passage of years, which had etched laugh lines around Leo's eyes and given his presence a deeper authority, had left no mark on the vampire. "I was thinking," Leo said, leaning into Caspian's side, drawing on his cool, solid strength, "about legacy, Alara's future, the foundation, the students I've trained. It's a good life, a full one." Caspian's arm came around him, a gesture of infinite comfort. "It is a great life, and it is not an ending." "I know, but it has a shape now, an arc. I can see it. Do you ever regret it? The bond, knowing that this," he gestured between them, at the view of their home, "has a final page?" Caspian turned him gently, his pale eyes holding Leo's with an intensity that never faded. "Regret? Leo, you gave my daughter her voice. You gave my house a soul. You gave me a reason to look forward to the dawn of each new night for the first time in centuries." His cool fingers traced the line of Leo's jaw. "You speak of an arc. You are not an arc in my life. You are the sun that changed its entire orbit. Every night that comes after will be different because you were here. That is not an ending. That is a transformation, and I will be grateful for every single moment of it, no matter how many centuries pass." The love in his words, felt through the bond and heard in his voice, was a balm. He knew it was the truth. Their love wasn't a tragedy waiting for its third act. It was a revolution that had already happened. 5 years later, Leo sat in the solarium, now a thriving indoor garden dominated by the mature moonlight willow and the luminous silver tree. His hair was more gray than brown, his movements a little slower, but his eyes, behind the grove's glasses, were as keen as ever. He was reviewing plans with Alara, now a poised young woman of 15. She was explaining a new project for the foundation, her aura a vibrant tapestry of intelligent purple and compassionate green. Caspian watched them from the doorway, his own aura, that unique, beautiful teal they shared, glowing with a profound, quiet pride. The bond hummed between them, a constant song of belonging. Later, when they were alone, Caspian took Leo's hands. They were older hands now, the skin thinner, the veins more prominent against Caspian's smooth, ageless palms. "The convergence is tomorrow night,"
Caspian said quietly. The lunar convergence, the same phase under which they had performed their bond. I know, Leo said. He felt a strange peace. He was tired, a deep bone-level tiredness that wasn't about sleep. The arc was nearing its gentle, natural conclusion. The bond, Caspian began, his voice uncharacteristically thick, will not keep you here. When the time comes, your essence will move on, as it should, but my connection to you, that will remain. A part of you will always be in this house, in me. Leo smiled, squeezing his hands. I know, and a part of you has been in me all along. It's what gave me the strength to build all this. He looked around the sunlit room, at the trees that symbolized their journey. I'm ready. The next night, under the full moon, Leo passed quietly in his sleep, in the bed he had shared with Caspian for years, surrounded by the scents of old books, night-blooming jasmine, and the cool, familiar presence of the vampire he loved. There was no drama, no pain, just a completed circle. Caspian held him as the mortal warmth slowly faded, feeling the brilliant golden thread of Leo's life force through their bond grow gently fainter, like a cherished song ending on a perfect, soft note. When it was gone, a profound silence echoed in its place, but not an empty one. It was a silence filled with the echo of the song. The bond did not break, it transformed. Where once there had been a vibrant, active connection, there was now a permanent, warm imprint on Caspian's soul, a space shaped exactly like Leo, forever holding his courage, his compassion, his light. In the garden, the silver tree's leaves shimmered with a particularly bright glow for a moment, as if in farewell and acknowledgement. Elara, now the Lady of Thornwood, found her father at dawn. He stood on their balcony, looking not sad, but deeply, quietly centered. His aura was still their beautiful teal, but the gold within it had settled into a constant, gentle radiance, like sunlight captured in deep ocean water. He's gone, she said steadily, though her eyes shone. He is, Caspian agreed, pulling her to his side. And he is everywhere, in the Foundation's work, in the laws he helped change, in the peace of this house, in you, he touched her heart, and in me. He looked out over the waking city, the first trains of the morning beginning to run through its veins. He thought of a desperate, exhausted young man who had stumbled into his lap, and in so doing had given him back the world. The story of the exhausted waiter and the vampire regent did not end that night. It simply became a new kind of story. It became the foundation upon which Elara Thorne built a lasting legacy of understanding between worlds. It became the quiet strength in Caspian's rule for centuries to come. And it became a legend, a whisper among both kindred and mortal about how the most powerful bond is not of blood or magic, but of chosen family, how a single act of kindness on a subway can change the fate of nations, and how love, in all its forms, is the only thing truly powerful enough to outlast the night.